Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Or if you are watching or listening back to this a little bit later, welcome to In Deep Sleep. I am currently uploading my back catalogue the last few weeks at least of these live streams over onto In Deep Sleep, trying to get it back up to a position where the live stream appears and then it appears on In Deep Sleep a couple of weeks later. We'll be there very soon. And thank you very much for all of the very positive feedback about that. First of all, just to quickly say, if you are watching this live, if you generally watch these lives, apologies about last week. I had intended to do a pre-recorded live stream. You know me by now. The technology beat me. This time it was just the charger for my laptop. I was happily here pre-recording, talking to my computer, and then my laptop just ran out of energy and juice, and the charger had gone. And by the time I'd managed to get a new one, I'd run out of time to record it and get it up for last Thursday. So apologies. I know that was a week off. Wasn't my plan. But if you are a patron, if you submitted some questions for that was about the wall. Do not worry, I've still got those questions, and I may well have already answered them. I got about halfway through the stream before I had to, before it stopped. So I will go back, finish that off, and upload that. So that is there at some point in the next week. There will be a live stream there ready and waiting for you. So that being said, today we are going back to our sort of mysteries of Westeros, or mysterious characters of Westeros is the kind of series that we're doing now, and we're looking at Qyburn. Now, Qyburn is I have to say, one of my favourite characters in terms of he's one of the most fascinating characters, and I think one of the most well-drawn characters that George R. R. Martin has got. As always, I'll start by just sort of setting out a little bit of the history, what we know about the character, and then I've got some questions from my patrons that I will work my way through. And if you're there in the chat, hi, by the way, if you're there in the chat, great to see you. Particularly if it's your first time, particularly fantastic to see you. But I will try and pick up as much as I can from the chat as we are going through. So, all that said, Qyburn. So let's start with a physical description. I think is probably the best way to do this. I am a massive fan of Anton Lesser. I think he's an excellent actor. I've seen him in a few things now. But I think one of the things just physically that perhaps is missing is the fact that he always came across, I think, in the TV show as being just a little bit sinister, which is absolutely fine. It was a great interpretation of the role. But I think that kind of misses a little bit about the way that George R. R. Martin describes this character, because the way that he describes him, he's physically tall, he's fatherly, he has crinkles around his eyes, he's not creepy, he's warm, he's ingratiating. This is what Cersei thinks when she thinks about Qyburn. Qyburn was old, but his hair still had more ash than snow in it, and the laugh lines around his mouth made him look like some little girl's favourite grandfather. A rather shabby grandfather, though. So that's what we've got going on. Even Cersei, who is quite a judgmental type, it has to be said, notices his laugh lines. Some little girl's favourite grandfather. That's how we're supposed to be seeing him and imagining him. And he is all the way through this. I'll probably mention this a few times, sort of on and off. He's ingratiating, is the word that George R. R. Martin uses. He gets on with people. He most of the time this seems like really quite nice. He's just friendly. He's helpful. But some people see it for what it is. Jamie, in particular, sees that there's an element here of what we might call social climbing, but it's social climbing with a purpose. He's not just trying to get as much power as he possibly can. He is trying to achieve something, and in order to achieve that, he needs to be mixing with the right people. We will get into all of that in just one moment. We don't know huge amounts about his early life. We're not told where he comes from, which family he's from. Obviously, if you're a maester, he goes to the Citadel at some point in his life. When you're a maester, then you lose your surname. That's gone. You think of all the maesters we know, Maester Aemon, Grand Maester Pycelle. We don't know what their surnames are. That's deliberate. The idea is that you join the Citadel, and then any previous affiliation you had, that has gone. You're now a Maester of the Citadel. So all we have is this name, Qyburn. And it's noticeable that, well, skating forward a bit, when he gets thrown out from the Citadel, he doesn't reclaim his previous name. He doesn't think to himself, oh, I will go back and try and find my old family and maybe they'll take me in. That's not on his list of priorities. So whichever family he was a part of, he's distanced himself in some way from. Why? We don't know. Is there some bad blood? Has his family now disappeared? Do they not want him there? It's not entirely clear. But whatever his previous life was, it seems not to be a huge part of the plot as far as he's concerned, and what he is about. But he goes to the Citadel and he studies and he becomes a Maester. And in particular, he trains under Archmaester Ibros. Now, he is known as being the great healing maester, the greatest healer in the land. We get a couple of little mentions of him here and there in A Song of Ice and Fire. And he studies under him, and he aspires to be even greater than him, to learn more than even the great Archmaester Ibros. And so as he is studying, what he realizes is that what the maesters do is, in order to understand life, they take a dead body and they cut it up and they look at it and they see how the different parts of the body work. And what Qyburn thought was, well, that's okay. I can learn a bit about this, but I also want to learn a little bit about death. Not just life, I want to learn about death. And the maesters take a dead body to try and learn about life, and he decided, I should probably do the opposite then. I should take a live body and study that in order to try and understand death. Which makes logical sense, but obviously then takes you into quite dark territory. He is literally cutting up living people in order to further his research. Eventually, the maesters discover he probably was trying to keep this a little bit secret for a while, but eventually he was caught and he was thrown out. His chain was taken away from him. He was no longer allowed to call himself a maester. There were rumors of necromancy surrounding him at the time. He gets thrown from the Citadel. This is a big scandal, really. At the time, the maesters didn't want to be associated with this person. But as he left, we're told that he considered himself, having seen everyone else around him in the Citadel, he considered himself to know more at that point about life and death than any other maester there, even more than Archmaester Ibros, who may well have been a greater healer, but he didn't understand so much about life and death. So he also, incidentally, he came away with as you would expect, a bad impression of the maesters as a whole. Whenever he talks about them, he refers to them disparaging as grey sheep. He doesn't have much time for them, except for one, Marwyn the mage, who we meet right at the end of the story. Sam goes down to Old Town, and he's the Archmaester who cares about the higher mysteries, about magic, basically. And apparently he actually understood, agreed with some of some of Qyburn's conclusions. We're not told whether or not he agreed with his methodologies, but he certainly seemed to agree with some of his conclusions. So that's where he was at. He got chucked out. The living that he would have been able to have as a maester, you can have a number of different livings. You can go out and You can serve a noble lord, or you can study in the citadel, or you can head off to far-flung parts of the world and write a book about what you've learned. There's lots of different career paths for maesters, but he was not a maester. He had his chain stripped from him. He was banned from calling himself a maester. So what was he to do? As we've already said, he, for whatever reason, clearly decided not to go back to his family. So he was casting around for a while, and he ended up with a sellsword company, the Brave Companions, also known as the Bloody Mummers. We don't know exactly when he fell in with them. They are an Assozi sellsword company who find themselves in Westeros, and they get caught up in all of the toings and froings in the Riverlands, led by Vargo Hoat. So they didn't care about whether he was a real maester or not. He clearly understood a bit about healing. He understood quite a few other things. He was useful to have around as part of their team. So he was now attached to a sellsword company, and a rather disreputable one, it has to be said. They find themselves in Harrenhal during this story, and they are there at a time when Roose Bolton takes control. They switch sides. They were Lannister, then they go over to support the Boltons. Roose Bolton, having taken over Harrenhal, he kills the maester that's there. And he does this because the maester sends off, or wants to send off, ravens warning people, Harrenhal's fallen, and he kills him. And we're not there. We don't see this through a POV chapter at the time, but it would appear Qyburn is just like, well, I can do the maester stuff if that's what you want. I've not got a chain, but I can do this stuff. I can be in charge of the ravens. I can do a little bit of healing. I've got lots of knowledge about lots of different bits of things. So, and Roose Bolton, who is ever the pragmatist, seems to have gone, fine, you can take over those duties while I'm here. He's not appointing him to his household or anything. He's just saying, while I'm here, you can do the maester duties. And it is in that capacity that when Jaime arrives and Vargo Hoat chops off his hand, Roose Bolton decides, or says to Qyburn, you need to sort this out. You need to make sure that his hand's okay. Because somebody just chopped it off. There could be infection. There could be any manner of problems with this. So that's what Qyburn does. There is an infection. He stops the infection from spreading, and he actually, seemingly genuinely, as far as we can tell, he saves Jaime's arm. He might theoretically, if the infection had spread, he might have had to cut off the whole arm. As it was, he managed to bind it up. He cleaned it out. It was all good. So that wins him some small favour with Jaime, who recognises that he's competent, even if he doesn't instinctively seem to like the man all that much. And when Roose Bolton sends Jaime off down to King's Landing, which we have to say, again, this was a massive sign that perhaps on first read-through many of us didn't pick up on. This is a massive sign that Roose Bolton has basically decided to change sides. He should have, if Jaime had come into his control, he should have sent him back up to Robb Stark and said, here you go, my liege lord, my king, here's the prisoner that escaped. But he doesn't. He sends him on down to King's Landing to Tywin Lannister. And he sends him with an armed escort of his own men, and also with Qyburn. Qyburn goes along. Qyburn seems to be very happy to go along, just to keep an eye on the wound, make sure it doesn't fester, make sure it's okay. He does that while he's going there. He gets on Jaime's nerves a little bit, trying to get into Jaime's good books. So he makes it to King's Landing, and makes it very apparent as he sort of comes in, oh, I'm here, I'm the person who saved Jaime's arm, I'm part of the retinue, etc., etc. And he arrives just in time for Cersei, who has a problem she needs to deal with. And the problem is Tywin's just been killed. Now, Jaime has played his part in helping Tyrion escape, but Tywin is now dead. And not only that, he is dead with Shay lying dead in his bed. Cersei is not always the clearest of thinkers, but she is very aware this is not a good look. People have to keep respect for the Lannister name, and for Tywin to have been shot to death on the privy while there is a sex worker lying in his bed is not a good look. So she gets a few of her most trusted people, and she wants a maester to come and just sort this out. Qyburn does it. Good job. Well done, Qyburn. So Cersei goes, okay, well, maybe I can trust this guy. She then sends him off on another mission. She says, okay, you now need to figure out what was going on with Tyrion escaping. He can't have just walked out of the Black Cells. Someone helped him. Something was going on. And so Qyburn goes down, and he discovers that the jailer, Hrugun, has also disappeared. And when looking through his Roman belongings, he finds a secret hidden gold coin from the Reach, which Cersei immediately goes, what? The Tyrells were involved. So she is thanking Qyburn. Now, Qyburn, this time he doesn't do such a good job. He clearly doesn't make all the connections in. He doesn't figure out exactly how Tyrion got out, who was letting him out, any of that business. But he gives Cersei the information that Cersei wanted. The idea that the Tyrells were involved in this. So she then thinks, okay, he's clearly someone I've given him 2 tasks and he's done great on both of them. Let's give him more tasks. And so she then gives him another one. She says, the mountain is here, lying, dying in agony. If you remember, he did win the trial by combat, but he got poisoned by Oberyn Martell. And nothing that Grand Maester Pycelle can do can seemingly help. So Cersei hands this over to Qyburn, and she basically says to him, do what you need to do. After it all, we need his head, though, because that needs to be sent off to the Dornish, and because they'd been promised the Mountain's head by her father. So he goes away and does that. And while he's doing that, she sort of gives him a little bit of extra cash, and she says, you're looking a little bit shabby. Get yourself some good robes. If you want to do some research while you're down here, you can have this area of the Black Cells. Here's some gold. I don't care what you're doing. Just do the things that I want you to do. So he goes away and he does that, and eventually he turns up and says, well, here's the head, and that all gets dealt with. And she promotes him straight onto the small council. There's a gap. Everyone knows there's a gap because Varys has gone, and so there's a gap as Master of Whisperers. And she allows him to go, and again, she throws money at him and says, just get Varys's old spy network, set it up again. You can be the Master of Whisperers, and then you're on the small council. And he's called Lord then. Like Varys was. Varys wasn't really Lord of anything. It was more of an honorary title. But he was Lord. Varys Qyburn becomes Lord Qyburn, Master of Whisperers, member of the Small Council. And so he has managed to get himself suddenly all the way up to a really high and important level. And she trusts him with more. She tells him about her dream, about her memory of Maggie the Frog, about the Vaughan-Strauss, about the younger and more beautiful person who's going to take everything from her. And she says, "Is there anything I can do about this?" And Qyburn basically says, "Well, yeah, you could. If you identify who this younger, more beautiful person is, you could kill them, and that would stop it." So she takes this and she goes, "Okay, so I think this must be Marjorie. Let's frame her. Let's make it look as if she's done all kinds of depravity. Qyburn, help me sort this out." A concoction of lies comes up. People are sent down to Qyburn down in the black cells, and Qyburn makes them confess to whatever Cersei wants them to. He does such a good job, in fact, that loads of people are confessing to things all over the place. Their stories don't necessarily match up. Basically, as far as we can tell, he is torturing them. And he's getting these confessions. Cersei's loving it, though. This is exactly what she wants. Somebody who will she'll give a task to, it doesn't matter what it is, and he will do it. And Qyburn also seemingly is really loving this situation he's got going on, because Qyburn seems to just want to do his research. And what does he need for that? Well, he needs a laboratory, which he's given space, and he needs bodies. Not just dead bodies, but live bodies, as we've heard that was what he was doing when he was in the Citadel. And Cersei gives him a supply of live bodies. People is another way of putting this. She says, "Here's a person, do whatever you want to them. I don't need to know." Qyburn seems to love this. He can carry on with his research, and as long as he's giving Cersei the things that she needs at different times, then she is going to just leave him alone and give him the money to get on with it. But then a problem arises. And the problem is that Cersei gets arrested by the High Sparrow, which leaves Qyburn in a slightly awkward situation, because he is only there because of Cersei. Everyone else is more than a little bit uncertain about him. Jaime even goes to her and says, I don't really like this guy. I know he's doing what you want, but he's got secrets. There's stuff going on there we don't know about." And she's like, "Everyone's got secrets." But when Cersei's gone, he gets pushed off of the small council. However, because he has set himself up effectively as Master of Whisperers, and nobody else knows how to operate this informant network, he's allowed to carry on in the black cells. He's allowed to carry on with what used to be Varys' spy network, or at least the bit of it that Varys seems to have allowed him to get access to. And he does get a little bit of contact with Cersei. And during this contact, then it sort of turns out she's decided she needs to have a trial by combat, and she needs to have Jaime seems not to be replying. She needs a champion, and she's queen. She needs to have a member of the Kingsguard. But it turns out there's a new vacancy. So Addis Oakheart, who we read about down in Dawn, dies, leaving a gap in the Kingsguard. And when she emerges back from her walk of shame, she gets back to the Red Keep, and someone scoops her up, a knight, a member of the Kingsguard, the White Cloak, and who is this? He's introduced as Robert Strong, who's taken a vow of silence. We can go into all of the details of that a bit later if you would like to. This is very clearly the zombie mountain. The body of the mountain somehow re-energized, seemingly undead, certainly not needing any sustenance. Nobody has ever heard him talk. Nobody has ever even seen his face. The helmet stays on. Nobody's ever known him to sleep or eat or anything. He just seems to be an animated suit of armor, 8 feet tall. So, Qyburn, it appears, has finally reached some kind of conclusion of his research and has created the champion that Cersei wants, which is the point at which we leave this. So we've not seen what happens here. We've not seen huge amounts about Robert Strong. We don't know how much independent thought this zombie mountain might have. We don't know the extent to which Qyburn might have created others. All of that's still a mystery. But Qyburn now, he is, at the end of the story, he's not in the small council, but still has this position of power. But the very last chapter we have of A Dance with the Dragons, Varys kills Kevin Lannister, and Pycelle, incidentally, which, given that Kevin was King's Regent, this leaves Cersei in charge once more. And there is a slot available on the small council for Grand Maester. And almost certainly he is going to come back into perhaps even more power than he had before. So that's Qyburn. It's a story of someone who is dedicated, it would appear, to his research, to science, to the extent that he is completely amoral. He just pursues what he wants. There's not much hint here that he's actively evil in the sense of wanting to do a bad thing for the bad thing's sake. He just wants to do his research, and he doesn't care what he does in order to do that research, which is, I suppose, evil in another way. But he does come across as this kind of arch scientist. The image we get, that I'm sure we'll come back to, is this Baron Frankenstein image. He creates life, but this is terrible life that he creates. So, and he's playing with death. So that's the kind of image we have, is this proto-scientist who is creating things that they really shouldn't have created, that is experimenting things that humanity should not be experimenting with. And now at the very end of the story is probably, or the point of the story we've reached, is probably going to get even more power going forward. Frankenstein was the monster. Absolutely. This is Baron Frankenstein we're talking about here. So Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster is Robert Strong. Baron Frankenstein himself is, as an archetype, Baron Frankenstein himself is Qyburn. The point you're making, that the monster, and it's a brilliant book. If you've never read it, incidentally, fantastic book. I will be reading it, my next big read, over on The Well Told Tale. It was, I think, the first or second thing I ever did on there, but the sound quality was really not good, so I'm re-recording that. So if you're interested, my one of my other channels, The Well Told Tale, where I audio narrate what I consider to be the finest science fiction fantasy stories ever. Really good book. Mary Shelley makes us ask, who is the real monster here? Is it the created being or the creator? Right, let's go quickly to the chat. Gillian saying, much care and appreciation to you from a girl and her dog, both made all the more cozy by your excellent storytelling. Well, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. Midnight Sun, would Qyburn be loyal to anyone willing to overlook his questionable ethics, or does he have a particular attachment to Cersei? He seems to like her. I mean, this is a matter of interpretation because we never have a POV from his perspective. We never will have, I think, a POV from his perspective. But it seems pretty clear from his actions that he seems to ingratiate himself with Roose Bolton. First of all, with the bloody mamas, then with Roose Bolton, then with Jaime, then with Cersei. It's whoever he thinks is best and most likely to be able to provide him with the next step to what he wants to achieve. Is he loyal to Cersei? I don't think he's loyal to her, but he certainly sees the advantage of having one of the most powerful people in the Seven Kingdoms giving him money, giving him space, allowing him to do his research. So if he can keep that going, he will. If he ever thinks that that's going to stop, then he will perhaps be looking elsewhere. Okay, let's have a quick flick through the chat. Jerby saying he's loyal to her as long as she's patronizing him. Yeah, absolutely. And Kieran Norton and Cole Carsnark, the name Robert Strong. Why this? Yeah, so this is an interesting one. He's chosen this for the name for his zombie mountain. Now, he clearly has decided he doesn't want to say, this is Gregor Clegane, come again. So he has to come up with a different name. Why Robert? One can only, I mean, Robert, first of all, is quite a common name in Westeros. There's nothing particularly special about it, other than obviously this is the name of the old king. So there's and the Lannisters still at this point are pretending that the line of kings, so Tommen is there because his father was Robert Baratheon. So this is kind of a nod to, loyalty to the family line. Strong, how strong, obviously, are the house that we know them from House of the Dragon. They were a very probably first men house who were lords of Harrenhal back in the time of the Dance of the Dragons. Why choose that name? Well, my only instinct is they were known as being strong, which it sounds like the most obvious point there. But if you're going to come up with a surname of a house, because this is a knight, this is a noble character, he has to come from a house, then pick one from a house where it had the strongest person in the land, which they did back in the day in the Dance of the Dragons, allegedly. So you would pick the implication is that this is some long lost descendant of House Strong. Hence the huge size, because a lot of them were quite large and quite strong, and yeah, that's the closest I think we have. It's just a sensible standard name that nobody's really challenged. He couldn't go for Targaryen or Baratheon or Stark or any of the obvious names. He couldn't go for a noble house which is still clearly out there, because then people go, well, hang on a moment, he's not from our house. You couldn't just suddenly like pick a random Martells, and the Martells would go, he's not a Martell. So it has to be from a house that people recognize as being noble, but there's not going to be anybody from their house turning up and saying, hang on a moment, he's not one of ours. So I think there's a lot of layers to this, but the basic layer here is this is Qyburn picking a name that sounds like the name of a knight, but which it can't be challenged by anyone saying, hang on, he's not from my house. Right, let's go to let's go to some questions from my patrons. First up, Lorelei Dragon. Where do you think Qyburn's loyalty is? Actually, I've sort of answered this one already, so I'll combine this with the previous answer. Where do you think his loyalties lie, if indeed he has any? It seems that he is more interested in getting support for his experiments than taking sides for any other reason. But perhaps I'm missing something about his history or character. No, but it's possible, and I think a lot of people do, because we don't know his surname, a lot of people do wonder, is there a backstory here? Is there an agenda here that we're unaware of? My instinct is no. My instinct is that he is actually what he appears to be, which is somebody who's been chucked out from the Citadel, who cares passionately about their research and has been cut off from doing their research and is now working out a way to do their research. And this puts them in the stereotypical mad scientist role. All they care about is their science. All they care about is their research. So, I think that is the answer. So his loyalty will be with somebody who can provide him the means and mechanisms that he needs, but only as long as they can. Catherine Percy saying, hi, Robert. I'm fascinated by Qyburn's balancing between science and magic. He definitely does seem to take the existence of magic as real, in as much as he talks about Maggie the Frog's magic with Cersei, and in his apparent high opinion of Archmaester Marwyn. I've always looked at him as a self-professed scientist, but what is his view on magic? Is it a supplemental force in the world? So, yes. So, first of all, we have to say that he does seem to think that magic exists. You have to place into context when Cersei's coming to him. Cersei is his patron. He has to keep her happy. She comes to him and says, oh, I've had this dream about this mage from many years ago. She said these things. What do I do about it? He, in any event, is going to reply, yeah, so you're not mad. This is absolutely fine. And we can deal with this. And this is what we're going to do. So, yes, he's from her perspective, and we see this from her perspective, he is saying, yes, Maggie the Frog's magic is real. From his perspective, which we do not see, maybe he's humoring her. And she's going, well, what do I do about this? How do I make sure this doesn't happen? And he's thinking, well, of course it's not going to happen. Magic's not real. And he says, well, all you have to do is identify who this person is and kill them. It could have been that. Cersei's POV is not to be trusted. So I don't think we necessarily should take Cersei's view on what he thinks is true. His admiration for Marwyn is there, but again, it's not 100% clear whether he agrees with other things that Marwyn says and does, or whether it's just that Marwyn, this is the main thing he says, Marwyn agreed with my understanding about life and death. None of the rest did. Now, what is his understanding about life and death? Now, the best, I've copied this as a quote, which this is what he says to Jaime, when this is the best encapsulation of what his understanding is of life and death. Once, at the Citadel, I came into an empty room, and I saw an empty chair. Yet I knew a woman had been there only a moment before. The cushion was dented where she'd sat, the cloth was still warm, and her scent lingered in the air. If we leave our smells behind us when we leave a room, surely something of our souls must remain when we leave this life. So that seems to be what Maester Marwyn agreed with. We don't know if Qyburn agreed with Maester Marwyn's other thoughts about dragons and magic and all the rest of it. So I think the first thing I say about his approach to magic is that we can't be 100% certain on this, because the things he has said could be interpreted in two different ways. From what I've seen, no. From what he said, it does seem that what he sees as being magic, he would see as being a thing for him to understand. He's a scientist in the best sense of the word that we have here, somebody who tries to rationalize what they see and to understand it, to categorize it. So that seems to be his position. He is trying to understand how this world works. And if he's being as objective as he can, as all good scientists should be, he should look at stuff and go, yeah, so that does appear magical. But what does magic mean? Is this just another mechanism of how the world works? So, yes, I think he probably does believe in magic, but whether he thinks of it as being magic, something inexplicable and otherworldly, or just, well, if I do this and then this and this, then it produces this effect, then is he just breaking down magic to this is another thing that happens in this world? This is how we explain it. So it's not 100% clear, his position on magic. Maybe he does think, oh yeah, so there's also, I'm doing my research and all of this other stuff, but there's magic as well. But he never really gets into that. Lorelei Tortillo Weir saying, Andrew, it doesn't stop being magic just because you find out how it's done, according to Terry Pratchett. Yes, the late, great Terry Pratchett. So that kind of plays into a couple of other questions I've got. Taylor Jones saying, I know you're fond of the term science white when referring to Robert Strong. I am. Based on the safe assumption that this is the zombie mountain, my question is, do you think this resurrection truly was purely science, or was there some kind of magic involved? Maesters obviously limit themselves away from magical pursuits, but we already know Qyburn doesn't respect the Maesters and what he sees as unnecessary self-imposed limitations. Magic in George R. R. Martin's world is unreliable. It usually requires sacrifice and is often not formulaic, where you can just repeat the same steps to produce the same results. Whether or not you think magic was involved in the science white's creation, do you think, unlike fire whites, for example, this would be a recreatable process that would work every time? So, really interesting. My long-held belief is that this is not an accident. Creating the zombie mountain is not an accident. This was something that Qyburn figured out in some way. Now, we'll put aside the did he use magic thing for just one moment. If he figured out how this works, that means that he can do it again. I've always thought of the zombie mountain, Robert Strong, as being a prototype. So, not just a one-off. Qyburn potentially could do this again. Now, maybe, as you say, magic in George R. R. Martin's world doesn't necessarily, it's not just a matter of ABC. Maybe he will have to tweak things a little bit for each person, do things slightly different. But if he's figured out the right combination of, I need to make a sacrifice, I need to do these things, I need to whatever. If he's figured that out, then he potentially could do this again and again and again. So, yes, I think it's repeatable. Is he using magic? Well, as I said earlier, I think that any magic that he's using he may or may not consider to be magic if he thinks he can understand it. Now, I think we're getting into subtlety and nuance here. I think George R. R. Martin, when we're talking about magic is dangerous and unstable, he wants us, the reader, to think that. That's how he wants to provoke this feeling inside us that we do not know what is possible. We don't know what Melisandre can do. We simply do not. She's done crazy things. We've now just kind of in our mind, oh well, she can see things in the flames. She can do shadow babies. Whatever. We've got this idea. I'm almost certain that in the next book, Melisandre will do a thing we've not seen before, and everyone will go, "Whoa! How did she do that?" It's because George R. R. Martin wants magic to be uncertain, but she will have been doing it intentionally. She intended to create shadow babies. She intended to see visions in the flames. She intended to not be poisoned when Maester Cresson tries to poison her. So she is doing some very intentional magic. She knows what Qyburn might think of as the formulae, the things she has to do in order to achieve an end result. It's the fact that we, the reader, do not necessarily understand. Now, she won't always get this exactly right. Of course she won't. Sometimes she will not understand stuff. Sometimes she will misinterpret things, etc., etc., etc. But the principle that we come back to with George R. R. Martin is not that magic is unpredictable for magic users. It is that it is unpredictable for us, the readers. Maggie the Frog knew what she was doing when she did her prophecies and predictions. All of these other magic users knew what they were doing. The fire mage in Karth, who created the flame ladder and climbed up it, was intending to create a flame ladder. These magic is intentional and can be, if not controlled, then certainly shaped in certain ways. And that, therefore, means that there is some kind of formula. And Qyburn may well have followed that, not thinking, I am now doing magic, but I'm doing science because I've figured out what I need to do. I hope that kind of distinction makes sense. Right, let's go to Relaxed Like a Cat. Hi, Robert. I hope all is well with you. It is. Thank you very much. I was just wondering whether you expect a POV chapter with a character that focuses on Qyburn and perhaps his laboratory, or do you think he'll remain an enigma? Well, I think he will remain an enigma. In terms of POV chapters, George R. R. Martin, he can and often does change his mind on these things, but he has said he's not introducing any new main POV characters. By which I think we can clearly understand that the POV characters that we've got right now, Jon, Dany, Tyrion, etc., those are the main POV characters we're going to have, which means Qyburn is not suddenly going to turn in the. It's not going to happen the same way that Sir Barristan or Melisandre spent a long time there in the story, but then suddenly, boom, now they're a POV character. I don't think that's going to be happening with Qyburn. So, is he likely to appear the other way, that a POV could happen in a prologue or an epilogue? I think probably not. I wouldn't put it beyond the realms of possibility. In prologues, George R. R. Martin has noted that the POV character in prologues tend to die, but he said, I quite like the idea of maybe sometime not having that character die, because they you're expecting them to die. So I like to keep people on their toes. So possibly, but he's never really used for a POV character at the beginning or the end, with the exception of Kevan Lannister. He's never really used a character who's sort of a significant character and then given them POV for a prologue or an epilogue. It's picking up a random person that we don't really know. Maester Crescent. We didn't really know who Maester Crescent was before that, for example. Pate, we didn't really know who Pate was. So that's the general theme. So probably not. Will we have a POV character from someone else, a POV chapter from someone else that looks in at what he's actually doing? Because we've not really had that. Cersei's not really paid much attention to what he's doing. She doesn't want or need to know the details. She just cares about the results. And I think realistically, certainly in the short term, the only character who is close enough to Qyburn, who we might see what he's doing through, is Cersei. And although maybe we'll have her go and visit him at some point, see his experiments, she's not going to focus too much attention on it. That's not what she's going to go there because she wants to get something from him, make him do a thing, not because she suddenly got a fascination with his experiments. Perhaps that could change, at the risk of sort of moving ahead to where his character arc may go. If he gets over to Casterly Rock, if Euron comes and teams up with Cersei, the first if I think is very likely, the second is very possible. And if Aeron Greyjoy survives as a POV character, which is possible rather than very possible, I would say, then he may well be the type who would take an interest in this kind of thing. So I'm not saying definitely no, but certainly in the short term, I think in the Winds of Winter, the best we will get is sort of Cersei seeing something in passing, or maybe after they've gone, pardon me, someone like John Connington may investigate. But overall, I think he will remain an enigma. Stephen saying, hi, Robert and Dan. If Qyburn learns about the existence of the Ice Wights and the Fire Wights, will he try to examine them and understand how they function? Could he or his research have an important part to play in defeating the others? Well, I think that he would definitely be interested. There was a moment in the TV show, we shouldn't place too much weight on the TV show, etc., but there was one moment in the TV show that felt very Qyburn in, I can't even remember which season it was, maybe even season 8, season 7, who knows. When they come back down to the Dragon Pit and they brought a wight with them, and the hound kind of like drops the box and the wight comes out, and then after it gets smashed up, there's a hand that is still doing that kind of thing. Qyburn picks it up and looks at it for a second. We don't see any more from that, but that felt very much like what Qyburn's reaction would be. It'd be, huh, what's this? This is fascinating. This is a new thing about life and death. So would he be interested? 100% if he gets the chance to see this. Is it likely that he will? I mean, this is a long way into the future of the story. At the moment, I can't see it. In terms of Fire Wights, Beric's gone, so we've really got Lady Stoneheart. There's no clear way that Qyburn should come into contact with Lady Stoneheart. The Ice Wights are all north of the Wall at the moment. There's no clear reason why he would go there. So in the short term, certainly in the next book, no. Perhaps there will be a way that he will in the future, and I think he will be absolutely fascinated. But will he then go, right, I've now got this bit of an Ice Wight, I'm going to study it, and after I've studied it, I'm going to tell everybody how we can defeat it, what the secrets of its animation are. That's not what he's done so far. He doesn't seem to be like the a scientist who then wants to go out and publish a paper for the betterment of humanity. Yes, he seems quite proud, and he seems to want people to understand quite how clever and talented he is. But a research paper or a Westerosi equivalent thereof, that's not really his style. He seems to be all about the research, not the sharing the results of it with lots of other people. So, might he play a part in helping defeat the Whites? I can't see it. Personally, he's perhaps, you might get to a point where everyone's going, well, how do we do this? And he goes, well, it's obvious, isn't it? You have to. So maybe, but that doesn't seem to be his arc. It doesn't seem to be his character, and it seems unlikely that he would instinctively want to be doing that. Right, let's go to, in fact, partway through this, as I always do, if you are here in the chat and you are enjoying the chat, if you're watching live, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators? The moderators are there. I can see them doing, I'll have to have a quick flick through just to see who's there. Carl Karsnark is definitely there. Andrew Kay is definitely there. Stephanie Frederick is there. There may be some others that I agree. Weirwood is there as well. Hi guys, I hugely appreciate you. If you are there in the chat, could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators, because they're the people who just keep the chat going, provide links to interesting stuff, keep people talking, keep the bots out. So they're the true heroes here. So please do show them a little bit of love. I also personally want to show a little bit of love to my patrons. Thank you. This is part of why I shape these live streams around patrons' questions, as a little thank you to them. If you want to support this channel, the best way to do this is through Patreon. There is a link down there somewhere. Alternatively, if for whatever reason you don't want to go to Patreon, I understand. There may well be reasons. If you wish to support this channel through other means, then you could be a channel member. And again, there's probably a button or something here. But anything else I want to say? If you missed it, all of my videos on the main channel, I'm now uploading onto Spotify. So at the moment, I'm doing them at breakneck speed. I'm just uploading them every day. You'll get a new video. So I'm working through the back catalogue. At some point next year, I'll have caught up with myself, and then they'll be released at the same time as they are here on YouTube on the main channel. But if for whatever reason you find Spotify easier to access, you can listen to them and watch them there as videos on there. Then do go and check out Spotify, or just go there and search for In Deep Geek and you will find them. Okay, I think that is Carl Karsnark saying, go to bed with Robert every night by going to In Deep Sleep. Thank you. Yes, that's the other thing. If you're interested, if you like going to sleep to these live streams, I've long ago abandoned any pretense of this being something I'm insulted by or hurt by. Fall asleep listening to this. That's fantastic. It makes me very happy that people can fall asleep to this, that it feels like a safe space to you. So what I do over on that channel, In Deep Sleep, links down here, I take these live streams, I take just the audio, and then I put it onto kind of like a soothing soundtrack, depending on what I'm talking about, maybe some wind or a crackling log fire or whatever, just some kind of nice backdrop which kind of fades to black, and then obviously at some point I will stop talking, and then the video will carry on for the full 8 hours. So hopefully that just, you don't have to worry about, there's no adverts in the middle of it or anything, so you don't have to worry about that. Hopefully that allows some people to get some sleep. Okay, adverts over. Yildanil. Hey Robert, hello to you. Do you think that Qyburn's work will be preserved and recorded for future generations? Shall he be restored as a maester, perhaps posthumously? However you look at it, he did reach significant scientific breakthroughs after all. What kind of metal would be associated with his speciality? Thank you so much, and my love for Dan and the moderators. Okay. Will his work be preserved? Only if he has preserved it, I think, is the answer. He's not going to be sitting down with somebody and saying, "Now let me explain everything that I've been doing all of this time." So if he's been keeping some kind of journal, then yes, perhaps that will be preserved. Will it be made available for future generations by the Citadel? Almost certainly not. Would he be restored as a maester? No. I think the thing is that they will. I personally can't see a world in which, in whatever shape the Citadel survives, people go, yeah, we wish to be honoring this person who is accused of necromancy, who kidnapped people and cut them open, which is what he did. So I can't see that in any way being honored. That said, I don't think the Maesters would get rid of his work. I think that they might potentially ban it, but they would keep a copy in the deepest, darkest bits of the Citadel library. There are rumors of many books there that are not available to the general public. Only the Archmaesters, it would appear, have keys that allow them to get into that part of the Citadel. So if an Archmaester wishes to do some research, they are trusted to do it. But general students are not allowed access to those bits. So I think that's the feel. His research, if he has recorded it, will not be lost, but it will not be promoted. Andrew K saying that the Citadel unfortunately rejects outlier innovative thought to their and the realm's detriment. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to Ranabim Mitra. What will happen to Qyburn post Fagon's invasion? This is young Griff's invasion of King's Landing. We have had previous discussions about Cersei going to Casterly Rock and her plotline joining up with Euron's potentially. What happens to Qyburn and Robert Strong? Rolly Duckfield versus Robert Strong, Howland versus Qyburn. I have a hope that if or when John Connington discovers that Fagon is a Blackfire, then he'll probably seek out Qyburn and Robert Strong and eventually create an incident which could mirror the Bells, foreshadowing with wildfire. What do you think of all of this? Well, in terms of what is likely to happen, I think that Cersei is going to mismanage the city. Now, I don't think I'm saying anything that is going to surprise anyone here. I think that Cersei is she's going to be back in control. She's going to mismanage the city. She's going to put taxes on people, which are going to be unpopular. People are perhaps going to start starving because of blockades and the like. She is going to do something dramatic, maybe blowing up the Great Sept, like happened on the TV show. Maybe not that, but something else. But she wants to get rid of the High Sparrow. She wants to get rid of Marjorie Tyrell. She has to do something. And she won't care whether that something causes lots of other death and destruction. So the people will hate her. The people already really don't like the Lords and Masters in King's Landing. There was a riot not that long ago in King's Landing, if you remember. And as far as the small folk can see, the same people are still in control. So they're going to hate her. And then they're going to see Fagon arrive. Here is this picture of a model king in waiting. At the head of this army of exiles, I'm returned. The Targaryens are back. And they're going to love him. And she is going to have to escape. Now, she may well not, see the reality of the situation. she may well be slightly deluded about all of this, but Qyburn will not be. Qyburn will understand when there's no way out of this. Don't forget, the Lannisters haven't got many soldiers in King's Landing right now. Most of their soldiers are in those armies in the Riverland that Jamie kept on coming across, and like, oh, here's an army outside Riverrun. Here's an army. I'm going to send a whole load, few hundred troops off to the Westerlands now. There's a whole load going on here at Raventree Hall. I mean, lots of things. That lots of Lannister troops there. Not many left actually in King's Landing. If the Tyrells turn against them, then there's not much hope. So I think that Qyburn is one of the few people that Cersei will actually listen to, and he is one of the few people who will actually be able to say, there's no way out of this, we've got to escape. He's also one of the few people, and we don't know whether it's going to get to this, who will know some of the secrets of the Red Keep about how to escape through the tunnels. Because he's there in the Black Cells, he's the Master of Whisperers, he will have been learning a few of the secrets. So he may well be the person who kind of escorts her out. So, whereas I don't dislike this idea of the bells with John Connington, and for those who don't really know, that his backstory, John Connington's backstory, involves he was made Hand of the King and he was put in charge of the King's army back in Robert's Rebellion. And he had Robert Baratheon cornered in a small town. And he went through this town looking for him and he couldn't find him. And he thinks to himself, if only I'd burnt it all down, if only I'd been ruthless, I would have got him. But I didn't. I failed to get Robert Baratheon. And the end of that was the bells were ringing, announcing the fact that the cavalry had arrived. Ned Stark and the allies had arrived to come and take on John Connington's forces. And they lost. They were forced to retreat. John Connington was stripped of his command and headed off to Essos. So he was left with this great feeling of he'd let Rhaegar down. He is almost certainly, or was almost certainly, in love with Rhaegar. Unobtainable Rhaegar. But he almost certainly was in love with him. And now he's been sold with this idea of we can put Rhaegar's son, Aegon. We think he's actually Fagon. He's not really Aegon's son, but as far as John Connington's concerned, this is Rhaegar's son, Aegon, and he is there, and he is going to put him on the throne. He's going to make these things right. The working theory amongst much of the fandom is that because John Connington often thinks about the bells as this like traumatic moment when he's all his chance of like proving himself, all his chance of helping save Rhaegar, that was his chance. But if he got Robert Baratheon wouldn't have killed Rhaegar later on. That's traumatic for him. And the bells associated with the I should burn these things down seems to kind of strike a chord that there's this George R. R. Martin is setting something up here. So is this all going to be connected in with him discovering that Fagon is a Blackfire? Instinctively, I think no. In as much as I don't think he's ever going to. I mean, somebody might come to him and say, "This guy's not who he says he is. He's actually an imposter, a Blackfire, whatever." I don't think he's going to believe it. I think he's a true believer. So that I think is not going to happen. The bells, I could certainly see ringing. And I could certainly see them triggering something here for John Connington. But the bells can mean a number of on the TV show when they had the episode called "The Bells," they just sort of said the bells only ever mean one thing. Um, that's not true in the books. The bells ringing out can mean a number of things. It can mean the death of a king. We've seen that a couple of times. The bells in King's Landing ring out for the death of a king. It could mean a celebration when Tywin Lannister arrives and saves the city from Stannis' forces. As the narrative goes there, they rang out the bells in celebration. So the bells can be rung for a number of different things. It's something important is going on, but exactly what that is may vary. So, what would the bells trigger? What could happen to make the bells be ringing? Well, if Fagon becomes king and dies, I'm not saying this is what happens, the bells will ring. And John Connington will again get that feeling of, I failed Rhaegar. I let his son die. And then if that's associated with fire and wildfire, yeah, things could go bad. I did a whole video. This was one of my collaborations with History of Westeros. I don't know when this was, a couple of weeks ago, about whether King's Landing will burn. And quite a bit of that was working through possible scenarios of how this might interact with the bells. But sort of the headline is there are almost certainly still some caches of wildfire dotted around in King's Landing, which could just, they're highly volatile. They've been there for a long time. So it's only going to take a little bit of fire, and that could potentially set huge parts of the city ablaze. Let's go to Corvus Corax saying, good evening, Robert, and to you too. Where do you think Qyburn is from? His features are not spoken of as a foreigner, but his name is distinct. Also, given the Victor Frankenstein parallels, may we also see Qyburn chased to a frigid north by his creations? Well, let's do his name and where he's from first. So I did go through just because I'm like this. I went through someone online, you can find it, has created lists of every name that features in A Song of Ice and Fire. And so I did go through the only name that I could spot in that, other than Qyburn, that is a QY as the kind of the prefix to the name, is the name Kyle, Qyle, which is a name which seems to crop up sort of in the southeast of Westeros. I think it's in the Crown Lands. I think there's a Dornish Kyle and also one from Vale of Arryn. So they, if you were to look at where his name might come from, we haven't heard it elsewhere. It is a distinct name, but you do get QY names in the southeast of Westeros. We've not, given the fact that we've not heard anything that makes people think, oh, he's a foreigner. He speaks seemingly fluently and normally like a native, and his features seem to be Westerosi. So, as far as I can tell, yes, he's from Westeros. Perhaps he's from some noble house, but I think there are times when I feel a bit bad about, but I give the boring answer. I mean, I'd love to come up with some wonderful tinfoil thing about actually secretly he's from this house over here, and that means that he's got this agenda. I think actually the boring answer here is he's just from some minor house somewhere. He might even just be. They do accept the Citadel do accept people who aren't from noble houses, give them a chance to learn, and if they're adept, then they can gain some links on their chain. So almost certainly his previous house, where he's from previously, are, I won't say irrelevant to the plot, but they're not the drivers of his character arc. Um, there are a lot of maesters that you think, well, maybe he has got some history. Maybe there's something going on there that we need to be aware of. But in this case, I think actually the better answer for the character arc is that it doesn't matter where he's from. As for the given the Victor Frankenstein parallels, might we see Qyburn chased to a frigid north by his creations? I mean, that obviously is part of the story of Frankenstein. I didn't know about the frigid north. It's possible that George R. R. Martin will go down that route. We don't know enough yet about Robert Strong. At the moment, he seems very loyal and certainly doing the things that he's told. We don't know how he is controlled. If he is controlled, we don't know any of the details about this yet. But is it possible that some of his creations turn on him? Yeah, I think that might work as a sort of an end point to his arc, as it were. He's reached a point where he's reached an answer, and he's now reached a practical application of that. But then that is what ends up getting him in some way. That makes perfect sense to me. Also, though, I have to admit, it's one of those things where I just wonder, at the end of this story, it won't just be the good guys that survive. I think there will be a couple of morally dubious characters who survive as well. Because George R. R. Martin is not just writing this great heroic fantasy where they all lived happily ever after. This is going to be bittersweet. Qyburn seems very competent, very capable. If he realizes things are going wrong, if he realizes actually this is no longer how I'm going to get what I need, he might just get on a boat and sail off to Essos and just be gone. Take what he needs and go. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to have, there's going to be a good and happy ending. He could have done great evils in this world and just escape at the end of it, because he's not the priority for people. They will be caring about the others. They'll care about the dragons, then they'll care about Euron, they'll care about Cersei. They're not going to care about him until they've worked their way through a whole lot of other stuff. Let's go to, I think I had a question in the chat. Where are we at? Okay, Roman Lakovets, hi there, saying, how good is Qyburn as Master of Whisperers? Apparently he found that Euron became king of the Iron Islanders, Iron Islands ahead of everyone. Yeah, so he certainly seems to get information. Now, I do not know, but it makes sense to me that he's sort of been told, I'll just take over Varys's spy network. The spy network might still be working for Varys. So it's entirely possible that he's only learning the things that Varys wants him to know. And maybe Varys wanted him to think that he's in charge of it, and it's working well by feeding him a few bits of information that are true. But then he will feed him later information that's not true. So, given the fact that we don't know exactly how that kind of handover has worked, whether he set up his own network as well, I think it's currently hard to say, because we've got a secret spy master hiding in the walls of the Red Keep at the moment, Varys, who has his own different agenda. It's entirely possible Qyburn might be doing a good and competent job, but it's also entirely possible that Varys might be pulling the strings in secret. Let's go to a question from Sir Tony Sled, saying Qyburn's character sticks out in his willingness to work for women, serving Cersei. The Maesters reject women, but Qyburn helps Jaime save Brienne. Yes, I guess so. I mean, are we looking for positives in Qyburn's character? I mean, I tend to view this as yes, you're right, but I don't think he's doing this because he's this hugely enlightened feminist who thinks women should be allowed to be leading. That doesn't seem to be where he's coming from on this. If we just interpret everything through this lens of him wanting to be able to carry on his research, of course he doesn't care if it's Cersei's giving him the resources. He will happily be supporting Cersei. Going back and getting Brienne, the situation there was that they headed out. Jaime laid his head down on the weirwood stump, had a weirwood dream, goes, nah, I think I need to go back. And Qyburn happily said, yes, of course. We know that Qyburn during that time was trying to get into Jaime's good books, to the extent that Jaime was starting to get a bit annoyed by it. So he's not going to there say no. Jaime's going to be safe. He didn't have to worry about Jaime. The worst case scenario, a couple of days extra journey time. So, yes, he is. He certainly seems very happy working for a woman, but I don't think this is for any particularly enlightened reason. Question from End Famous, saying, what is Qyburn doing? Medical, not magical, with his subjects. Medieval human centipede dialysis with a poison, or straight up Frankenstein replacing the head or other organs or body parts? Well, I think in as much as George R. R. Martin likes to keep magic mysterious from us, I think he's trying to keep what Qyburn is doing mysterious from us. Clearly the vibes he's giving off are Frankenstein vibes. My take, I've talked about this, I think I did a whole video on this one actually. My feeling is that the mountain's head is not there. It was sent down to Dawn. And so that the helmet's effectively just like soldered onto the top of the rest of his armor, and there's just no head in there. So I think he's just animating the body in some way. So what is he doing? He is trying to learn the secrets of death through experimenting on the living, which means that in order to how can he animate a dead being? He's going to see how live beings are animated and in some way replicate that. That seems to be what is going on from the information that we've got. He was trying to deal with the poison with the mountain, but Cersei basically was happy for the mountain to die. I don't think with Robert Strong he replaced any body parts because he had a whole body, and the body we see is 8 feet high. So if we had the mountain who was 8 feet high, 8 feet, I don't know what that is in centimeters, well over 2 meters, probably 2.5 meters high. So then we're you can't say, okay, well, he's only using one of the mountain's legs. He has to be using both of the mountain's legs. He can't just have, oh, well, I'm not going to have the mountain's torso because it's clearly the mountain's torso. So he's using the mountain's body. He's not like adding on. Maybe with other things he is, but there, no, he's just animating a dead body. Beesman, thank you very much. Very generous. Saying it's easy to look at evil deeds of Qyburn and assume he would just be evil. But if there is evil not serving his purpose of seeking knowledge, no reason to assume he doesn't have consciousness outside, not excusing any of it. So is he? I mean, I think he is instinctively within the realms of his research. He appears to be amoral in the sense of he doesn't think about the morality. Pardon me. He doesn't think about the morality of what he's doing. That's not a part of his mental process. Oh, should I be doing this or not? That's not his mental process. His mental process is what's the best way for me to experiment and try and find some results and perhaps reach some conclusions. It's by doing these things here. And he doesn't seem to ask whether he should. It's just that, does this help me? Then I'll do this. Outside of that, does he show a kind of a moral core? I think it's quite hard because most of the time we see him is through the eyes of Cersei or Jaime. And whenever we do see him through those eyes, then he is very clearly trying to make himself useful to them because he sees them as a way, and the Lannisters and the money and the power, as a way for him to do what he wants to do. So maybe he's nice to children and animals. Who knows? The thing I found, and the reason I started this whole stream with a physical description, is because it kind of flies in the face of all of the things we've been talking about since. As this kind of amoral scientist who does some terrible things, who doesn't care, he's just focused in on that. There are laugh lines around his mouth. The clear implication, and a twinkle in his eye, he looks like somebody's favorite grandfather. The clear implication is that certainly in some circumstances, he is nice. He laughs. He smiles. That's how he gets laughter lines. So there is an implication there that of a bit of his character that we simply have not seen. On what we have seen, he seems pretty Machiavellian in trying to achieve the things he wants to achieve, and amoral. But the implication of his appearance, what George R. R. Martin is trying to tell us through that, suggests perhaps there is another side that we don't know. Tony's saying, I'm saying he probably isn't afraid of powerful women the same way other characters are. Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. Let's go to a question from Andrew Biederman saying, greetings, Robert. Is what Qyburn is doing with what remains a type of magic, even if we call them science weights? Is this like elvish magic in Arda, Middle-earth, where others might call it magic, but it's just natural to that world? If souls are just a thing in Planetos and they can be harnessed, isn't that still magic by another name? I think I'm confusing myself here. Yes, so I absolutely get the point, and this is something a few people have tried to tease out a little bit earlier. The dividing line and the example you're using there comes really from when the Fellowship, in Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship would go to Lothlorien, and Sam's there going, "Oh, you're using magic," I bet, and Galadriel's like, "Yeah, I suppose you would call it that to us. It's just doing things, working with nature, but to you, I guess it must seem like magic." Is that a useful kind of analogy for what's going on here with Qyburn? Is he just recognizing, yeah, so other people might call this magic, but for me, it's just I'm understanding how the world works. But to a degree, I would argue, the big difference here, though, I think, is that Tolkien's elves, Galadriel, is working with nature. The things that she are doing, that she does, it's almost as if, like, yes, this is what nature is supposed to be like. This is what the perfect form of growing these plants should be like. Because here we're putting aside the ravages of time and the evils of the world, and we're creating this. For Tolkien, the world, the natural world, the land was it had a kind of a moral center. You can see this digression here, everyone, but uh, I find it quite a fun one. When you're reading The Lord of the Rings, it becomes very apparent. You can tell the nature of the land, as it were, and the nature of the people who inhabit that land by what it's like. Fresh running water, always a sign of goodness. Water runs through Lothlorien. There's rivers in the Shire, etc., etc. If ever you get something being dammed up, stagnant water, no water, these are signs of bad things and bad places. The orcs outside Moria dammed up the river. That allowed the Watcher in the Water to come in. Sauron dams up the river. You go to the Dead Marshes, you get this rank, stagnant water. These are evil places because the water is not running fresh and clear through there. That's just one example of how Tolkien uses the landscape and the world to kind of show the character of a place and the people who have been there. As I said, that was a little bit of a digression. What the elves do, what Galadriel does, is working with nature, as nature should be, as things work. That is in contrast to Qyburn, who is he is understanding how things work, and then he's trying to use that as a way to go away from the natural order of things, at least the way that most people would see it. The natural order of things is all men must die. Death is a natural part of life. He is, and he would say that a natural part of life is that something lingers. That may well be true. But what he seems to be doing or wanting to do is grab hold of that something that lingers and then use that as part of powering of life, unlife, as it were. So he is taking a natural thing and using it for an unnatural purpose. So that is the kind of the opposite and distinction that I would say. He is understanding how things work, but then he's using that knowledge in a way which is not going with the natural flow of things. Brian Velko saying this video is a lot kinder to Qyburn than I would have guessed. Well, I don't know. Do I need to sort of pause and say Qyburn's done some horrific, terrible things? He's amoral, and he's done some pretty horrible stuff along the line. He tortures, he does terrible things to normal human beings who deserve a whole lot better. He is terrible human. If I've not established that bit before, there we go. That's the context for what we've got. I'm trying to what we're trying to do here, I think, is trying to understand a little bit of the what drives him as much as anything else. Right. Let's go to Buttoned Up Reader saying Robert's just too warm and fuzzy. Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. A.D. Ross saying, hello, Sir Robert, and to you too. I hope you're well and that the gremlins are behaving themselves this week. Yes, they are. Thank you. I've got a new, in case you missed it last week, the reason the live stream didn't happen last week was that the charger for my laptop just broke and my laptop just stopped working and I didn't have anything else I could charge it with, so I literally could not record the stream. So I've gone and bought myself a new one is the short answer, which means that we're all okay now. I am curious, is AD Ross saying, I'm curious about your thoughts on how Qyburn and Euron may interact if their plot lines do cross. It seems fascinating to me what will happen when Euron comes face to face with the Victor Frankenstein of Planetos, and whether Euron will see Qyburn as another holy man or wizard to sacrifice, or whether Qyburn's loyalties might end up drifting over to Euron if the book goes in a direction anything like the TV show and the Crow's Eye allies with Cersei. My central working thesis is that for these characters, Cersei is going to muck things up in King's Landing. Pretty much everyone thinks that. She has to escape to Casterly Rock. George R. Martin has told us we will see Casterly Rock. That all kind of makes sense. Euron is going to do terrible and dark things down on the southwest of Westeros, but he is going to fail in his mission in capturing Daenerys. He will therefore potentially be looking for a new bride, and Cersei is there, and that therefore makes sense that they hook up in some way. Added to which, when Euron, has his visions, which we kind of take that they're clearly a little bit out there, but we kind of take it that there's some elements of truth going on in there. He seems to have a woman standing next to him, tall and cold and beautiful. So that kind of matches with what Cersei might be like. So it makes sense. It's not going to be the same as what happened on the TV show, but the two of them kind of joining up in some way does make sense. So the idea that Euron and Qyburn might interact in some way is there. How will they interact? Well, I don't think that Euron will see him as like a holy man or something. He seemed to be kind of collecting wizards, holy men, and the mother of his unborn child to be acting as sacrifices. So I don't think that he would be using Qyburn as that, because Qyburn is effectively a maester. Now, Euron wants to create death and destruction. If he discovers or finds out that Qyburn can create zombie mountains and the equivalent, Euron will be interested. So my instinct is that he will wish to use Qyburn, and he will potentially have a whole host of things that he can give him. Euron's always like coming, oh, and now I found this dragon binder, magic horn. Oh, and I've got some Valyrian steel armor. And I once had a dragon egg. And he's like always producing like that. I've got this as well, by the way, which he got from his plunderings in his earlier days. So it would not surprise me if he like comes out with something, say, well, would this be useful to Qyburn? And Qyburn's like, yes, it would. So they could get on well, in as much as Euron will think he can use Qyburn, and Qyburn will see somebody who's giving him what he wants. Qyburn, however, is not stupid. and I think he will be able to see what Euron is like, and will be very wary of him. So I think that's, if I had to guess, that would be the way it would go. Flop Fear 13 saying, from geek to geek, I just want to tell you that you do amazing work and it is very much appreciated. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate it. That's very kind. And Beesman is a new member. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, if you wish to support this channel and you, for whatever reason, don't want to go over to Patreon, Patreon is the best place to support the channel. But if you would rather become a member here of the channel, I hugely appreciate that too. So thank you. And that also means your comments are a little bit easier for me to spot as they're going through. There's a lot of comments in the chat going through, and I'm talking at the same time. So multitasking, not always my strength, but I try to pick up as much as I can, and think if they're highlighted, then I'm more likely to. Yeah, Michelle Raimo pointing out that also Euron would be very happy giving him test subjects. Yeah, I think that's very true. Catherine Furseth, what do you see Qyburn's role and arc going forward in the story? Is he going down with Cersei in the end? Yeah, so I sort of answered this a little bit when I was answering other questions. So I see that he will tie himself to Cersei for as long as she is able to provide the things that he wants in order to do his research. The same will be the case if Euron does come onto the scene. If they crash and burn, then he is not going to hang around. He's going to find somewhere else where he can go off and do some research. And I suspect that he will not think that that's in Westeros, because realistically, he will now be so associated with Cersei that there will be people out there who just, even more than before, won't want anything to do with him. He already associated himself with an Essozi sellsword company last time when he was down on his luck. So I think he will end up just getting on a boat and going to, assuming he survives, getting on a boat and going to Essos. I think that's the end. I've got a couple more questions, which are sort of slight tangents from my patrons, which I should get to in a moment. Now's a good time to drop any more questions about Qyburn into the chat. Northern Tommy saying, Qyburn can read people in no time. He pivots to manipulating Cersei lickety-split. Great phrase, lickety-split. But yes, absolutely, he does. It's one of his great strengths, you have to say. Jaime does see through it a bit, but from someone who is down on his luck, nobody would want to hire him or have anything to do with him, to work himself up in a matter of months from there to being a member of the small council is incredibly impressive. And the way that he does that is by seeing, where's the next step? He was there with, here's a sellsword company that they don't care about whether or not the Citadel chucked me out. Here's a lord who will allow me, he doesn't want to maester, but he will allow me to do the maester things. Oh, here's a more important lord. Jaime has suddenly arrived. I can get in his good books. Oh, here's somebody even more important than him, Cersei. She's somebody in a position who might be able to help. And so it's almost like he does go, he as you say, he pivots from one person to another person, always just trying to see how do I get what I need from this person, and he will stick with somebody even to the point where they're starting to get annoyed with him until he finds somebody who is a step up. Let's go to a question. So, Caius Ballerina, will Frankenstein get his bride? Phallus, maybe. Oh. Robert Strong, but you sort of clarifying here. Yeah, it's not something I've thought about. It's quite a horrific idea, but yeah. So Cersei has sent a number of women down there, and he actually seemed to prefer having female subjects. It has to be said. We don't know exactly why. Maybe it's something to do with the creation of life. Who knows? So, will the next zombie we see be a woman? It's entirely possible. Will that be the bride of Frankenstein, as it were? Quite possibly. Yeah, Phyllis Stokeworth, an idea. Um, uh, uh, so KPSI Bobby, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, saying there's no doubt Qyburn is a horrible person, but do you think from his point of view he is a scientist and serving his own curiosity, similar to Show Qyburn, or is he like Joffrey? Yeah, I think from his own perspective, he's a scientist. I don't think he actively. I mean, he's never given any impression of actively wanting to hurt or to do harm. That doesn't seem to be getting enjoyment from it, which is what Joffrey did. Um, he just wants to do his research. House Ballerina saying, I bet he'd make headway in Qohor. I doubt black goat worshippers care if he tortures people. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's probably no coincidence that the Bloody Mamas were headed up by the Black Goat of Qohor. Reflective Rambling picking up a question from Peace Unity. Thank you. I love it when people pick up questions for others. It's very generous. Saying, what do you think the Faceless Men would feel about Qyburn's activities? Do you think their paths may cross? Well, as you probably, I mean, I've said this a few times. I've done videos on this. The Faceless Men are not just a cool group of assassins. This is a faith. This is a faith with religious beliefs. And Valor Morgulis is not just a cool phrase. This is a statement of belief. All men must die. They fundamentally believe everyone must, at the end of their life, they die. And that's a natural part of the way that the world operates. They, on that basis, will see anything which is preventing that from happening as, and I don't know whether they'd use this word, but heretical in some way. So they will be opposed to this. And I think that there's probably like a difference between that they recognize the sort of the others, this kind of existential threat coming there. And I think they would probably see that even as different to someone like Qyburn, who is proactively trying to stop death, animate the dead. That it's to them it would be anathema. Is there a way that they will meet? I mean, I think Jaqen, or whoever Jaqen is masquerading as, is the only possible person I would have thought. I don't think that he's going to end up going to Braavos during the scope of this story. Maybe he'll end up going somewhere like that, but during the scope of the story, maybe he won't. But there is a faceless man in Westeros who is currently in Old Town, and he may well escape from Old Town. And where might he go? Perhaps he would head up to Castle Rock, which is where Qyburn probably will be. Martin S. I haven't yet finished the first novel, so I haven't come across Qyburn in the book series, but from the show he comes across as the ultimate unethical scientist, not nasty for its own sake, unlike Joffrey or Ramsay. Yeah, absolutely. You're very right. As I say, the only sort of big difference, I think, which is why I sort of started that, was sort of the physical appearance and the way he comes across as Anton Lesser, I think, is fantastic actor. He imbued all the way through it, he felt a little bit kind of like made your skin crawl all the way. You didn't like him. Um, you're not supposed to think that that's not the way George R. R. Martin describes him. He describes him as being like somebody's favorite grandfather, which is very different feel. So yes, as a character, it's very similar. It's just the kind of the feel for other characters. Ballerina, whose, if any, head do you think is on the mountain? His own? Someone else's? Maybe one of the dwarves beheaded for Cersei? Rob's? No one's? Headless? Yeah, I think headless. I have done a video on this. What happened to the mountain's head, or something like that. There are, I think, a few clues to this. Firstly, nobody has seen it. He's never eats anything. He never says anything. If you look through kind of like the visor, then you can't see eyes. You can't see anything. So there's no evidence of a head. The helmet never comes off. It seems to be kind of soldered onto the rest of the suit of armor. Secondly, the head itself has gone to Dawn. Now, you could come up with some argument on maybe it's not actually his head, but how many heads are actually that big? The head of, yes, a dwarf's head might be outsized, but the mountain is massive, huge. Not just outsized for a smaller person. This is massive for a big person. So they seem to be completely different scale. They do discuss this in Dawn when it comes down there. They have this really kind of macabre feast. They put the skull. It gets sent to them. They put this on like this little pedestal, and then they have like a 7-course feast around it. And they do discuss: is it really his head? And then everyone's like, well, I guess so, because that's a pretty distinctive size. And what on earth has Cersei got to gain for not sending his head? And Cersei doesn't seem to. We get a few interactions between her and Qyburn about this, and every time she's like, have you sent the head? The head's going there. She never thinks we need to keep this head for a future zombie mountain. She doesn't even know about the future zombie mountain. So she thinks that the head's gone down there. The Dornish think pretty much is the head. You're relying, if you think it's not the mountain's head, you're relying basically on Qyburn having managed to find from somewhere a skull the size of the mountain's head, and then sending that off, lying to Cersei about it, whilst keeping the mountain's head, which it's not impossible, but it doesn't seem likely. And that's the third bit of evidence that I would add into this is way back in book 1. Bran has, in that chapter when he's unconscious and he has this kind of dream chapter, and he looks around and he sees his family dotted about, and he also sees some threats. He sees somebody who's very clearly Jaime. He sees someone who's very clearly the Hound, and he sees someone who's very clearly the Mountain. And I don't have the exact quote off the top of my head, but he looked inside the helmet and there was nothing, just blackness, black blood or something like that. And that is like, so the Mountain in Bran's vision did not have a head. So my instinct, and George R. R. Martin loves these kind of horror things, and it actually works in a horror sense. He hasn't got a head. Imagine like at some point he gets into a fight and like somebody bashes the helmet off and there's nothing there, but the rest of his body's still moving. That would be pretty horrific. Christy Moniz saying, does Qyburn experiment with grayscale? Should an outbreak occur? We've not known that he experiments with grayscale. Um, should an outbreak occur? Well, the most likely way in that part of the world it would occur is through John Connington. And John Connington is only going to be in the city, I think, once Cersei and Qyburn have gone. So it's um, he certainly would have some thoughts and ideas about it, I feel sure, but it doesn't seem to have been his specialist subject of research, and the chances of him coming into contact with it, certainly in the next book, are quite limited, I think. Um, Theos Ballerina saying, compared to the Fire Whites, Robert Strong lacks agency or personality. Is it because it took so long for him to come back, or the method with which he came back? With no personality, how is he controlled without warging like Ice Whites? So the last one, I think, is the last question there is the bit I'm most fascinated by. I mean, in terms of the first bit, saying he lacks agency and purpose, personality. Yeah, he does. We've not seen huge amounts of him, but when he's kind of described as like he just sort of like stands there or he picks up Cersei. Um, so is this because there's something that lingered? If we're going with this as the Qyburn's theory, there's something that lingered of him was loyalty to the Lannisters. It's entirely possible he was very loyal to the Lannisters, um, and is that the thing which is just still there and driving him? Certainly, our working thesis is that the longer that a body is dead for, then the less lingers. And yeah, so he was dying for a very long time. So how is he controlled without warging like the Ice Whites? That is the question I think we do not have an answer to. Because Qyburn, the creator, certainly doesn't, in the kind of description that Cersei was kind of out of it at the end of this chapter, but when she arrives back at the Red Keep and kind of collapses and Robert Strong carries her, we certainly don't get the impression of Qyburn being there with like a little control pad, or even having to concentrate to go, now you're going to do this. He certainly doesn't seem to be skin changing into him. So we don't know how this works. My best guess is that they, or he at least, and we'll have to wait and see others, is that he has only the degree of agency to be doing the thing that he needs to be doing. So it's almost as if Qyburn has somehow managed to sort of extract what lingers as being you're loyal to the Lannisters and you do what you're told. And so that's his personality. But we don't know. Maybe we will get a little bit more information. Reflective Rambling gifted one IDG Live membership. Thank you very much. That's really kind. That's really nice. So let's go to question from Martin S. Somebody's grandfather? If that is the description, it sounds similar to one of the children of the Light Commanders, Geer Bonholt in The Wheel of Time, if I recall correctly. Well, I'll go back to it just because it's there. Qyburn was old, but his hair still had more ash than snow in it, and the laugh lines around his mouth made him look like some little girl's favourite grandfather. So that's the line that we have to describe him. Let's go to Martinez again. Thank you very much. I was wondering about magic in A Song of Ice and Fire. Is there a built-in talent there in the Wheel of Time or Star Wars style, or is it just a matter of learning and understanding the required rituals? Is it maybe unknown? So this is to a degree mystery. George R. R. Martin likes there being a mystery to this kind of thing. There certainly seems to be a need for intentionality, but there also magic does seem to sort of pass down through generations, as it were. So the skin changing and potentially green seer magic seems to pass down through those are first men heritage in some way. The dragon dreams pass down through Targaryen, Valyrian heritage in some way. And there are presumably others. I have my suspicions about the Spicer family, for example. So there certainly seems to be some kind of magical bloodline thing going on here, some kind of innate talent that you have to have. But along with that, there needs to be study. You need to understand it. Miri Mazda went off to a Shire and studied. She lists all the different people she studied under. You get Melisandre, who says that she has spent, she's been practicing her arts and studying for years beyond count, or whatever the phrase is. So study and learning and understanding is also a part of it. Basically, could any random person see stuff in the flames? Could any random person perform some dragon magic? Potentially, because magic is uncertain, but generally speaking, it appears there needs to be some kind of aptitude and some kind of which could also be triggered, perhaps, and some kind of learning and intentionality. You can go if you're interested in George R. R. Martin's longer thoughts on it. There was ages ago, History of Westeros did a really interesting interview with him, and he talked about this. He talked about this a few different times, but I remember particularly watching that, and he talks about how he deliberately he wants magic to be a mystery, in that he thinks that if you know the ingredients, if you get an eye of a newt and a leg of a toad or whatever it is and put them in and stir it a certain amount of times clockwise or whatever, then this will produce this effect. If you understand all of that, then the magic loses its mystery. It loses the kind of the fear underlying that, what is this? I don't understand it. And so he deliberately does not wish to explain it. And I think that applies for who can be doing this magic, as well as how the magic is done. Okay, let's go to a couple of questions. As I say, I've got a couple of questions that are not directly linked to Qyburn. Like Martin S has another question. Before I could do that, Martin S asking, follow up to that. Put another way, could anyone who got Melisandre's knowledge transferred into their mind do Melisandre things, or is some minimum strength required? Well, that's the bit that we don't really understand. So certainly there is an element of, is this a magical person? There's also an element of, is this a magical time and moment? There's also an element of, is this magical sort of formula done? Have you performed the ritual correctly? All of these different things are there, but George R. R. Martin deliberately throws in some things that just make us go, well, how does that work? So my favorite example of this is the first time that Beric Dondarrion is brought back to life, is that you get Thoros of Myr brings him back to life by doing the last kiss, effectively the last rites on him. No thought of or intention of bringing him back to life, but he does anyway. That seems to go against all of this kind of idea of intentionality. Is that, well, how did that work then? Was that direct intervention by the gods? Who knows? Right, let's go to Alhad saying hello, Robert. Apologies for asking an off-topic question. Not a problem. I was travelling during the last live stream. Okay, not a problem at all. The world of Ice and Fire tells two possible versions of the long night. One in which the sun never rises, and another in which the spring does not arrive. The fan community in general prefers the first one, but I think the second one is more probable. What is your opinion? My opinion is that the long night was brought by the others. Right in the prologue to the very first book, we get it's cold and wintry and north of the wall. Not wintry because it's not winter hasn't arrived yet, but it's cold north of the wall. But then the moment that the others advance, that entire atmosphere seems to change. There's a chill in the air. The everything is just shifts, and that I think is showing us that they bring an artificial change to the weather, the climate, something along those lines. So my instinct is that if the first long night was a time when there were lots of these others who were all over Westeros, then what that means is that it was darkness, it was cold. Both of those things could be ways that people could have interpreted it. The sun never rises because it's dark. You never see the sun. Spring never arrives because it feels like it's always winter. So my take is that both of them are observations of what happened rather than explanations of why it was happening, if that makes sense. Caius Ballerina, what is your opinion of the theory that he might, Qyburn might bring back one of Cersei's children? Unlikely, but Untommen is my favourite candidate for the Valonqar. Because, you say unlikely because you think it's Jaime, but Untommen is my favourite candidate for the Valonqar. So, will he bring back one of Cersei's children? I mean, he's not bringing back Joffrey. Joffrey's gone. Myrcella or Tommen? I mean, possibly. The argument for Tommen is that the Valonqar is little brother. Tommen is a little brother. He will put his hands around your pale white throat. Why would zombie Tommen try to kill her? That bit I don't know. Would he just turn on her? It's not clear. I would say I kind of get it as an idea. Maybe she's so distraught, but that she says to Qyburn, bring him back. Okay, I mean it's pretty horrific, but maybe. But then the next bit of logic is just like it feels kind of speculative and just based upon this one idea of who the little brother should be. Jaime is also obviously a little brother, and I think that there's a whole lot more kind of character arc stuff there that leads to him being the most likely Valonqar. With the Valonqar, as in who is going to kill Cersei, then there are a number of possible candidates that could work. This is everybody seems to have their own favourite. I think the most likely is Jaime, but I don't think we're far enough through the plot to sort of say 100% that this is going to be Jaime or this is going to be anyone else. Let's go to question from Ranabir Mitra saying a recent video about the Where is the Mountain's Head is another case where I wonder if George R. R. Martin took inspiration from Tolkien. The mountain not having a head is like the Witch King with no head but a crown. What do you think? I know that we're not going to get any clarification on this, but here's the fantastic quote. Well, thank you. I will happily read out the quote. Always happy to read a bit of Tolkien. This is when the Witch King is at Minas Tirith. The gates have been blasted open, and he goes through, and everybody's this aura of fear goes before him. Everybody sort of scatters except Gandalf on a Shadowvax. The Black Rider flung back his hood, and behold, he had a kingly crown, and yet upon no head visible was it set. The red fires shone between it and the mantled shoulders, vast and dark. From a mouth unseen there came deadly laughter. So, is this something that might be an inspiration? It might be. It absolutely might be. There is a difference, clearly, but with the Witch King, you couldn't see his head, but if the rest of his armor wasn't there, you wouldn't be able to see that either. He was all invisible. The zombie mountain is physically there. It's just that he doesn't have a head, but you can't tell because he's got a helmet on. So maybe there's an inspiration there, but it's a sort of a slightly inverted one. And let's go to Martin S. I think you're still in the chat. You asking a question about the Wheel of Time. You're saying you've been working on a model of how the one power strength rankings actually map to underlying ability, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And you created this kind of multiplicative model, and you just wondered. I hope you'll forgive me for not reading out all of the details of your calculations on the stream. I found it really interesting that what you did. I tend to I would agree whether we should trust Asmodean, but saying that male magic users are stronger than female magic users in the same kind of proportion that male arm strength is stronger than female arm strength. Perhaps that's true. Certainly, you get characters like Rand who are incredibly powerful. What I would say is that I really liked your kind of workings out there. I would say that for me, Robert Jordan works. We often kind of like say, this is a hard magic system, this is a soft magic system. Brandon Sanderson has a very hard magic system. Everything is explained. It all comes out over time when you're reading his books. This is what this means. This is how you do that. You have to produce these things. All of that there. Someone like Tolkien, a much softer magic system. Gandalf just did this, and there's no real explanation for why. Galadriel has this power. What does that mean? And it's a lot softer. Both work. The way Robert Jordan tends to work is by mixing. At least my take on it is mixing both of these. So he has elements of this kind of like hard magic system with the explanations, like how weaves sort of work, the attributes of magic. He's got like the Angreals, and here's how you sort of boost your magic by doing this. So there's a lot of kind of explanations about how you do these different things. But he leaves a lot unsaid. There's a lot of instinctive magic that happens that isn't just you do this and then you do this and you do this. It's not in order to harness your magic, you need to look inside. There's the leaf or the flame or whatever. Particularly with kind of the male use of magic, very instinctive. So he kind of does a little bit of the both. It's almost like he has the foundations with hard magic, and then the stuff on top is kind of the soft magic. Whereas we can sort of say, therefore, we've got these different types of gradations of power. That I think is part the foundations, and then the top bit is left deliberately vague by him. Okay. Samuel Hyatt saying, what do you think of the chances of seeing the mountain that rides as a headless horseman parallel? Maybe he leaves King's Landing to go to war in Winds. I like all of these kind of like the parallels. This is one of these things. One of the wonders of George R. Martin is writing is the way that he does use these kind of inspirations from different places in other fantasy fictions. And just in this story here, we've obviously got the Frankenstein thing there. We've got the Witch King we were just talking about here. Now we're talking about the Headless Horseman. Yeah, one of these things, if he hasn't got a head under there, at some point we will see this. Now, in the short term, while Qyburn and Cersei are just there in King's Landing, I suspect that they're okay with this idea of we're still pretending that this is just a night. Polite society is not asking us about it. Everybody's a little bit uncertain. Kevin doesn't like it. He thinks there's something very wrong going on, but nobody's directly challenging it, and that works for them at the moment. So the helmet stays on. Later, once she's kicked out of King's Landing, if she does team up with Euron, then I don't think that they will care huge amounts if people see there's a headless person wandering around. And yes, he can ride, or he could definitely before ride the mountain who rides, could be a headless horseman. So is that a thought which will cross George's mind? I mean, I think it certainly would entertain him. So yes, we might see it. I suspect not early on, but perhaps a little bit down the line. Carl Carsnight says somehow Gandalf survives. We're actually told how Gandalf survived, so that bit wasn't quite so soft. And Caius Ballerina picking up a question for Ephraim T. So thank you very much. Robert, Qyburn knows Marwyn. Do you think he's been to a shy like Marwyn? I mean, he doesn't mention it. So, I mean, that doesn't mean he hasn't been there. The impression I got with the Marwyn connection is not that they were best buddies. It's just that Marwyn was the only one who was going, that makes sense. Everyone else in the Citadel was like, you're cutting up people? That's horrendous. And Marwyn was the only person who was there going, oh, okay, so the results you're getting, I understand that. That kind of works. So that's it. And so when he gets chucked out, he may well have known him reasonably well, but when he gets chucked out, the person he remembers, and it is like they all hated what I was doing and chucked me out. Oh, Marwyn was different. He did. I kind of get the impression that this was used by George R. R. Martin as a way to just create an impression of Marwyn before we meet him. He drops him in again in book 1 when Mary Mazdur is saying, oh yes, and I was trained by one of your maesters. And Jorah's there saying, yeah, really? What was his name? What did he wear around his neck? And she says his name was Marwyn. And it's like, okay, is that supposed to mean something to us? No, but we'll log it at the back of our head. Marwyn, he's a maester who is engaged in magic and has been traveling. And then we get this other mention of him. Oh, he's a maester who engaged with, in some degree, what Qyburn was up to. So we're creating this image of him before we even meet him. So my general take is that the mention of Marwyn is as much to be building up Marwyn as our understanding of what Marwyn's like, as it is trying to build up our understanding of what Qyburn is like. So a slightly long way round of getting to it. I think what I'm saying is there's no impression that I get that he therefore was like best friends and they went off to a shy together. That doesn't seem to be the feel we're getting from that. But it doesn't mean that he didn't go to a shy either. It's just we've not been told about it. He doesn't say much about his past, it has to be said. Right. So I think Peter Kubikcher saying, I'm going to turn this stream into In Deep Sleep. Well, you're very welcome to. You're absolutely welcome to. Okay, so next week, what we are going to be doing is we will do the wall, which was the pre-recorded stream I was going to do and half did, but didn't get a chance to finish it off. So all of the patron questions which you submitted, patrons, thank you very much for that. I will be answering them next week. What else is coming up that we need to say? Witcher stuff. If you're into the Witcher, I don't know. I mean, this is obviously a Song of Ice and Fire stream. There's a couple of Witcher things happening soon. In next week, hang on the 30th, 4 days time, the latest Witcher book is out. A new proper Andrzej Sapkowski has written a new Witcher book, and the English translation of that is coming out then. So I will obviously be reading it very quickly. I'll try and do some kind of a breakdown or something of it. Let me know in the comments below what you'd like from that. I mean, my instinct is just to do a sort of explanation of the book as a whole. This is what it is. This is where it's set. If you've not had a chance to read it, or you won't get a chance to read it, this is what happens at a high level. That instinctively, that's what I want to do. But let me know if you think I should do something else, or you think you'd like a non-spoiler version. I don't know. So anyway, I will be doing a video about that. I'll probably do a couple more Witcher ones. I tend to do my Witcher videos when there's a Witcher thing going on, because also at the end of next month, The Witcher Season 4 is out. So I won't be covering that as a TV show. I won't be doing episode breakdowns and things like that, but I will do a few extra Witcher videos over the course of the next month or so. And that is, of course, also with videos on Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire, as usual. Okay, I think with that, I will say that appearing... well, first of all, patrons, thank you. Moderators, thank you. Could you give, if you're there watching this live, could you give the moderators another little bit of love? I would appreciate it. But if you are watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to Patreon. Patreon is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. Okay, that is all for this time. Thank you so much. Some fantastic questions again. The wall next time, and then maybe we'll do a Lord of the Rings one again. It's been a little while since we've done that, so that the week after. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.